Today, we're going to talk about the GROW method, ways to work on our trauma healing and transformation. The GROW method is something I started to systematize the trauma informed work that I've done over the last 30 years. And in the process of doing that, I came up with this acronym of GROW, GROW. It's a simple way to focus our healing energy to ground, recognize, open, and walk in greater wholeness. All people go through some level of traumas, whether it's little traumas and hassles in life or big major events. Some people go through what we call complex post-traumatic stress as a result of various forms of trauma throughout their developmental periods of childhood. There's lots of different variations, but none of us escape trauma in some form, whether that's a little t trauma or a big T trauma. And it'd be nice to have ways to help us manage that trauma and to transform that pain into some form of purpose and meaning. The GROW method gives you a clear way to heal and grow, and it has four major steps. This approach will follow modern ideas based on neuroscience, attachment based research, post traumatic growth, and trauma informed care principles. It can help us understand ourselves, heal from our traumas, and live more fully in our lives. And this method will help you do more than just get through hard times. It has a sense of being resilient, but it empowers you to transform your experiences and allows you to turn those wounds into wisdom, into strength, into a true and meaningful life. All of this is going to be based on the foundation of grounding. And in grounding, we're referring to safety. This is a central process for healing. Simply telling our trauma story doesn't necessarily heal us. It can actually create more problems by re traumatizing us. The mind will engage in denial and dissociation to keep those traumatic memories blocked off because we aren't able to function being fully cognizant of those traumas. It's kind of like going to the doctor and they're saying, we're not going to bandage you up or stitch you up. We're just going to let the bleeding keep on going for healing. And trauma-informed care is the same way, trauma healing. So based on that, those key principles, I'm going to give you some grounding techniques that will help you align with creating a very safe, stable nervous system. The essential strategy to start with is that we have to calm down that trauma activity. Then we can build up capacities and coping skills. Oftentimes, we will do the reverse. We will start adding coping skills and try to help people build their capacities with new skills, new learning. Unfortunately, the recidivism rate for people who go through homeless shelters or substance abuse treatment programs or other type of inpatient or outpatient programs is that they will then relapse or go back into old patterns of behavior again because they haven't adequately ground themselves and engage in practices to ground themselves on a daily basis. This is essential for everything else. You wouldn't build a house without a firm foundation. And so getting the nervous system to regulate is key. We do that through mindfulness practices, breathing techniques, and various somatic practices. We also do that through secure connections. We are designed to be in relationship with other people. And we often co-regulated in our relationships. Much of our trauma can be healed without being around stable, healthy people. To understand that we're talking about stable, healthy people, because you can be around people who are not, and that obviously does not ground you. It keeps you, again, re traumatized. Thirdly, we want to make sure we have a safe environment. We want to work on practice for the nervous system, get into secure connections, and establish a safe environment that helps us to be physically and emotionally safe. So let's go through a few sensory-oriented grounding techniques. The body is based in our senses, our sight, our smell, our taste, our touch, hearing. All of our senses are involved in getting our nervous system to be grounded. And so one of the things that I like to do is called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. And this is a popular technique, and you might have heard about it. But essentially what we're doing is we're getting grounded in our physical body by naming 5 things you can see around you. Just look around and notice a few things in your environment. Then you look at 4 things that you can touch. What do you feel? My chair, I can feel the desk, I can feel the keyboard in front of me. I might be able to feel the pen that's on my desk. And then there are 3 things that you can hear. Just attend to sounds, birds, children, car noises, air conditioning, clocks ticking, that kind of thing. 2 things you can smell, and sometimes it's a little harder for some people. but we look at 2 things we can smell. I can smell my coffee that's over here, and I also have a candle that's burning. And then one thing you can taste. I can taste a little of that coffee as well. Or sometimes instead of the one thing you can taste, I will say, "What is one thing that you're grateful for?" 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 gets us physically grounded in our body into the here and now, the present moment. In that present moment, we can have presence so that we can then cope with our trauma or the trauma experiences that we are living through day by day. Another very popular way to ground the body is through a breath-based regulation practice. We can engage in something called box breathing. That's where you inhale for a 4 count, hold that for a 4 count, exhale for a 4 count, and then you hold that exhale for a 4 count. So you have a box sort of diagram, breathing in and breathing out. As we are elongating that breath and holding it, and or exhaling that breath and holding it, what it is doing is it is helping the neurotransmitters and the various chemical soup within our body to calm down. It's allowing us to expel all the carbon dioxide and bring in good oxygen for the brain and the body to help bring stability again. Sometimes people will use humming or singing. You find people often humming at their desk while they're working or singing along to the radio while they're driving. And it's not just a fun recreational activity, it's actually a very regulating activity. It stimulates the vagal nerve, and that's the 10th cranial nerve that goes from the brain down through the brainstem into the gut. And it nervates our face, throat, heart. The only area of our body that has more nerve cells than the brain itself is the gut. The gut is surrounded by various nerve cells, which is why we say trust your gut or what's your gut reaction to the situation. Our gut is very intricately played to our body, our visceral senses, and that in turn allows us to ground. By engaging in humming or singing, we're stimulating the nerves that through the vagal nerve to our tongue and mouth. Oftentimes, when people go through trauma reactions, they lose their voice, or we tell people they need to speak up for themselves, or they need to find their voice. That's a metaphor, but it's also a literal truth for the nervous system because when we go through trauma, it shuts that down. Humming and singing, maybe even drinking water, it stimulates that vagal nerve, which then creates a parasympathetic or relaxation response within the body, getting us physically grounded. Another way to engage our body in grounding is through physical movement. We are walking out in nature on a hike or taking a quick stroll around the office building if you're at work on a break or lunch hour. You can do stretches at your desk, kind of a desk yoga, if you will. You can do walking meditations. You can do wall push-ups. Go over to one of the walls and do a few push-ups. Anything that gets your body moving will allow your nervous system to engage that relaxation response, which will create a sense of safety. Sometimes grounding is not just in the physical body, but sometimes grounding is actually more of a thought process. So we can ground or do grounding exercises by naming categories. Like how many colors can you name right now? Blue or red or green? And even adding that to what's in your physical environment. How many colors can you see around you? I see green, I see a blue sky. Right? Focusing gets you oriented to the present again, which gets you engaged in other presence with other people to be safe. By naming categories, you're using a mental strategy which engages the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the area of the brain that is supposed to mediate our stress responses in our midbrain and our brainstem. But when we go through a stressful reaction, the brainstem hijacks our thinking brain. So re-engaging that through a naming process is a mental sort of grounding. You can name candy bars, ice cream flavors, breeds of dogs. There's different ways in which you can use naming things as a grounding exercise. My favorite cognitive grounding exercise is to use gratitude. Simply naming 3 things that I'm grateful for at any moment will help engage this frontal lobes. The frontal lobes are the area of our executive functioning skills, our ability to stay present, problem solve, be creative, and mitigate the mid and back of the brain trauma reactions. So just being grateful for, I'm grateful that I'm here to be able on this live session to talk with people. I'm grateful to have the work that I can do. I'm grateful to have this beautiful sunny day that I can enjoy and to live in and the location where I live. Because our cortisol levels are often very high in the morning, which they should be to get us awake, and they should be lowest in the evening so that we can go to sleep. Oftentimes that's reversed. But in the morning, in order to get that going and positive, I will do gratitude practices when I first wake up before I ever get out of the bed. And after I've done my gratitude practices, I'm already in a positive state of mind by the time my feet have touched the floor. And so that's a great practice for you to use in terms of cognitive grounding exercises. Now, for those of us who are faith-based, there are a lot of spiritual or meaning-based grounding exercises that we can also engage in. This is both body, mind, and spirit. So prayer and meditation is a very common practice. It's something that I engage in very first thing in the morning after I get my coffee, and my gratitude practices. Some type of inspirational or scriptural reading, engaging in a loving kindness practice, can send kind thoughts to yourself and to other people, engages compassion, which is a way to regulate the nervous system in nature allows us to connect and get endorphins from being outside. Engaging in rituals or practices in the morning routines or exercises that you do every day. This ritual, these traditions that we engage in, gets our mind and body and spirit fully engaged for the day. These are simple mind, body, spirit exercises that you can use to help you ground, which is the essential component of this trauma healing and recovery. The second stage of the GROW method, it is recognition. Is recognition of the wounds or hurts or perhaps patterns that we engage in life. Once we've been able to ground into stability, we're better able to work on some of these more painful parts of our lives or look at more difficult aspects or challenging circumstances that we're going through. Everyone has patterns. Everyone has wounds. And those wounds, if they're not addressed, will cause us to repeat those again in our day-to-day life. Oftentimes, people are stuck in these patterns. Most of the times when I'm working with couples, the problems they are presenting, they make them out to be personal. It's about you. If you would change, then my life would be better. But the reality is that it's not just about you or me. It's about us. It's about the patterns we engage in. Sometimes we call this the more you do X, the more I do Y. We're a pattern. We're stuck. You can name these patterns in your life. Name them in your own personal relationships, in your marital relationships, work contexts, and the different areas that you feel like you keep having to run up against in your life, problems that keep coming up, debts, bad habits, addictions, whatever it might be. If you would stop and say, okay, what has happened in the last week? And what can you predict will happen again in the next week? You can probably predict what's going to happen. Or if you go home and you have to deal with your teenage son about his homework and his grades, you know exactly what he's going to say. You can predict the pattern. If you can predict the pattern, you can prevent the pattern. Understanding and recognizing these patterns helps us cope with them, but we need grounding to feel safe enough in order to do it. Recognize it's not about blame and shame. We are not looking at past wounds and patterns as an area of guilt and shame. We may feel some guilt, we may feel some shame, but this is not the point. The point is not to make us feel worse. It's actually to help us gain some wisdom and learn some lessons so that we can do things different. We want to be able to acknowledge the impact that these wounds or patterns are having in our life. We want to identify the patterns that are going on, noticing the recurring thought behaviors and habits that we engage in, and then practice compassion on those things. Approach those wounds from a place of gentleness. So, here are some practices that you can engage in that will help you with recognizing the wound or the pattern going on. You can do a body scan where you simply do a scan from head to toe, notice what's going on in your body. Maybe I have a lot of tension in my shoulders. I ask myself, what is that tension trying to say to me? Where is that tension coming from? Where do I most feel that tension, that pain, that numbness within my body? And where is it located? Am I carrying a lot on my shoulders? Am I having too many heavy weights in my life? Am I dealing with some situation that might require me to set better boundaries or speak up about issues or concerns that I have? That's something that's very difficult for me to confront. Combining that with journaling can be a really helpful way to recognize patterns and wounds. Journaling without trying to worry about grammar or making sense or even having a beginning, middle, and end, none of that really matters. It's just getting it out on paper and writing things down. In the discovery process, you'll begin to realize, oh, here's a pattern in my life and here's a wound. And then you can start applying different interventions to that, which we'll look at more in our next area of openness. You can also do what I call an emotional weather report. You look outside or get your phone app to see what the weather's going to be like today. Is it going to be foggy? Is it going to be raining? Is it going to be warm? Is it going to be cold? How should I dress today? These help us plan for our day. You can do an emotional weather report. How am I feeling today? What's the emotion? Different emotions come and go throughout your body. Neuroscience backs this up, saying that most emotions only last 90 seconds. Did you realize that? Most emotions only last 90 seconds. The reason they last longer is because we try to suppress them, manage them, control them, and they don't want to be controlled, right? Emotion, energy, and motion. So instead of trying to control them, just notice the weather, what's going on, report that weather, and then we have fog in the morning, but sunshine in the afternoon. So we don't let one mood control our entire day. Like I had a bad morning doesn't mean I have to have a bad afternoon. You get the point, right? I have a bad week, and I'm gonna have a bad month. And so I think we get ourselves caught up in this negative fatalistic thinking, and we get stuck in our trauma patterns, and they go on longer. So emotional weather reporting can be another way to help us manage or recognize these patterns and to change them. Now, here's a fun one. It's called the people pleasing checklist. Notice throughout the day how many times you say yes when you actually mean no, and where you prioritize other people's needs over yours. Then start looking at on that people pleasing checklist how many times you're actually able to say no and prioritize your own needs. That can be very difficult for many of us. Just having a little checklist can help us recognize our triggers, patterns, or habits, or bad behaviors. The more we're aware of them, the more we can address them. And the more we can address them, the more we can adapt and change. You can also do this with perfectionism. Notice when good enough just isn't acceptable to you and how much that affects you and the impacts on your life. What's driving that need? Ask yourself, what is driving this need to be perfect all the time? Does it come from a childhood message? Does it come from how I was raised? Ask yourself these questions. Did you have some bad experiences that made you realize good enough is not enough? Or maybe you're actually saying, I'm not good enough. That's a common problem. And recognizing and building awareness allows us to address them. Let's move on to the third area, which is looking at openness. Openness to healing or new possibilities is based largely on post traumatic growth principles. Openness to healing involves meaning making, it's engaging in this transformative process that we've already started through grounding and recognition. Then it will foster growth that will go beyond just survival. Up to this point, we're just surviving. We're recognizing our patterns of survival, but really what we want to do is we want to thrive. So this stage will encourage us to reframe our trauma narratives, to cultivate resilience, and to integrate some new perspectives into our life that we haven't previously allowed to be part of who we are. Expressive arts are some of the ways. You can see some paintings that I've done here in the background. It's more just hobby and ways that I relax and do my own self-care. Creative outlets like art, music, writing, and movement, dance, all provide nonverbal ways to process emotions and experiences. We keep relating to that body, the somatics. So that is a crucial part to many people's life to find creative outlets. And you don't have to be expert, just doodling, getting colors in, moving, doing circles, or maybe swaying to the music in the kitchen while you're cooking when no one else is looking. It doesn't really matter. Engaging yourself in these creative outlets. Practice singing in the shower, even that nobody wants to hear you outside of that shower. That's the way I am. I just make a joyful noise. So engaging in these things can be helpful to you to again express creativity. Again, creativity comes from that prefrontal lobes, the executive functions, which mitigates our brainstem and emotional brain. So here are some techniques for being open to healing and some new possibilities and practices in your life. One of the things that I do every morning, I do what's called Electio Divina. Electio Divina is a contemplative practice. It's a sacred reading that moves through reading, meditation, prayer, and contemplation. Basically, it's reading some kind of motivational, inspirational, or scriptural text and allowing that reading to stand out. You can also do it with poetry, some music. What divine reading means is that you're letting a word or a phrase stand out to you and meditating on that word or phrase. From that, engaging in some type of mindfulness or prayerful practice, which allows us to engage with higher powers, with God, something bigger and larger than ourselves. And for people in the AA movement, you may go through something in the big book, take something from that, and then using that to meditate on and letting that sort of be your meditation for the day. I can't tell you how many times I have meditated on something that allowed me then to take that, which was for me essentially, and then using that in my trauma work with individuals, the very thing that was feeding me was feeding them. And so that has such a multiplying effect. And it's so encouraging that what I'm reading can help other people. That's a great way to engage in a practice that I do every morning. You can also write a letter to your younger self. You can tell your younger self to say, here's some things that you're going to struggle with in life. Here's some problems that are going to come up. Here's some things that you're going to think you know, but you didn't know. Here's some wisdom I'd like to impart to you. Writing letters to your younger self offers compassion and wisdom to our past experiences, which are really to ourselves. But it's a healing practice because we're basically forgiving ourselves and offering compassion to ourselves. But it's through this format, looking at trauma narratives in our life and writing that letter to our younger self. You can write a letter to your older self. You can write a letter to who you are next year, future journaling. 1 year from today, who would you like to be? What would you like to be experiencing? How would you like to be living? What would you like your emotional, mental, spiritual, financial, social state to be? Some people engage in therapy practices. I advocate that. I think everyone should be in therapy, doing some individual work or some group work, some inner healing work, doing some family systems work. All these formats can be helpful. Find a life coach, find a spiritual director, finding peer support groups to be involved in, finding service to other people. All these things engage in the community and open us to very healing and possibilities for our life to thrive, not just survive. One way of our openness to new possibilities is to engage in service or volunteer activities. This service or volunteer activities helps us be part of something bigger than ourselves, help us to focus on causes that we believe in. Maybe they're traumas we went through and we want to help other people now get through those same kind of traumas. Or we've been through difficult situations and we want to help other people who are going through difficult situations. Whatever that might be, however small, however large, however short the time frame or long the time frame, whatever's possible in your life, giving ourselves in service helps us to decrease isolationism. Isolationism is a big problem of trauma. It helps break that cycle. We move then into the next level, which is walking in wholeness. Walking in wholeness recognizes post-traumatic growth principles about personal strength, spiritual growth, appreciation for life, deepening relationships, and personal transformations. All these practices are called practices for a reason. You have to practice them. Ideally, you practice them when you're not in a stress or traumatic reaction. Why? Because then they'll work. If you wait until you have the panic attack, your panic attack tools are not going to work. If you wait until you have a trauma reaction or been triggered, not going to work because your body's already hijacked. Now, you won't necessarily avoid being triggered or feeling anxiety or panic, but when you do, because you practice these every day, throughout the day, when you're not in a panic attack or trauma reaction, you're going to be better equipped to manage that. And the duration, the intensity, and the recovery time is going to be much better if you engage in these practices because your nervous system has become more resilient. I coined the phrase neural resiliency, and that develops this inner wholeness that allows us to better manage challenges in life. Have morning intentional practices. Each day, have 5 to 10 minutes or longer if you can afford it to engage in your morning practices. Intention in the morning and what your intentions for your day and setting your goals and priorities and groundedness. And at the end of the day, integrate that through a review of how you showed up. How did you show up today? Were you able to walk in wholeness or was it more of a woundedness sort of day? Were you easily triggered today or did you overcome those triggers? What were your wins today? Where maybe you struggled? Set a new intention that for tomorrow, I will integrate those wins and losses, pros and cons, ups and downs, and into my steps, my program, my life, my practices again tomorrow. Set it aside so you can sleep well. A big one for wholeness is boundaries. Having a healthy boundary practice or a maintenance schedule, being able to practice yes and no's from a place of your own self respect rather than fear, that will help you avoid confrontation, people pleasing, and show up. Also, I think being fully present with people is a great wholeness practice. I remember going through my period of burnout where my open door policy as a clinical director became a closed door policy. I didn't want to talk to any more people. I didn't want to hear any more problems. I needed to do some real healing work in my own life. Looking at people as not interruption and fully giving them your presence, your attention, your focus, really listening to what they have to say. Most of the times when people are talking to us, we're coming up with our responses before they finish. That happens a lot in couple relationships and in family dynamics. Allowing yourself to be fully present with that person. You'll find that you can get through that experience in a much helpful, healing way for you and for them than if you ignored it. The problem just compounds. So, really being present, being authentic, and not letting people be an interruption. Finding mentors in life, someone you can turn to when you need help and support. When you've got good news, who do you call first? When you have bad news, these people are probably mentors, support people, key people in your life. They're probably not a lot of them. They're probably just a few people in your core center of life that you can truly depend on. And that's all right. Develop other networks of people that you can then be people that you can turn to. This will help you feel support as you walking through this wholeness practice. Start with 1 or 2 practices in this area. Begin making gradual movement. Little steps create big outcomes. If you find at the end of your day you didn't do that, set that intention for tomorrow. It simply means you need more practice. That's why we call it a practice. Add new elements only when you feel the current ones have been established. You feel like you've gotten some good strategies in mind and you're feeling like you're walking in greater wholeness. Your life tends to be better managed. You're better able to say no. Then add something new. Don't add more to your plate until you're ready for that. If you feel like you're stumbling a lot, then maybe take one off your plate and try to back up a little bit. Maybe back up on even your therapies. I know I've had people come every week, a couple times a week, and I said, I think you're doing too much. You need to do less. I think that a therapist would say that, but it's true. Sometimes we're doing too much. We need to back up a little bit, give ourselves a little bit of space, and then come back at this. Timing is a big factor. Have grace towards yourself as you are walking this journey of life. It's not the destination, it's the journey. Having partners and people to support us, that's important. Be flexible. Being able to feel joy without having to be guilty about it, to have sadness without having to be, go into a black hole of despair. Be emotionally flexible. Engage your own state management. You can move between activation and calm without getting stuck. Right? There's times I need to be busy and times I don't. It's a rhythm of my life. I can manage the different states in my life. Right now, I need a lot of energy and focus. I'm going to eliminate other things. Other times, I can allow myself to relax, take a nap, even whatever it means for me to manage my emotional, physical state and create a better rhythm in my life. Also, perspective shifting. You can have both struggle and growth occurring at the same time. It sounds weird, but it's true. You can be really sad about something in your life, and other areas are actually a lot of gratitude and success. They can both be true at the same time. That's paradoxical, but that is kind of how life is. So be emotionally flexible. Use manage your state or state management, and then using some perspective shifting. What you're going to find is as you practice these things in the grow method, you're going to see more resiliency and more post-traumatic growth. You're going to be able to bounce back from setbacks more quickly, or the duration is not as long, or the intensity is not as high. And as you do these things, you begin to see, I am actually making some progress. So ask yourself some of these questions as we're wrapping this grow method up. How am I living differently than I did 6 months from now? Where did I choose wholeness over woundedness this week, this day, or this last hour? What patterns am I noticing that need some more attention in my life? I've been working on this habit, but these other habits, they're still there. I need to work on them. What's the wisdom or lesson I need to learn here? And how is my healing benefiting other people? Because it helps your family, your relationships, your work environment, everything be benefit because you don't exist in isolation. There are some warning signs to watch for as you're going through this grow method. A lot of times people will use spiritual bypassing. You just need to pray more. You just need to read the Bible more. And that's maybe true. But sometimes what we need to do is start looking at some patterns and taking responsibility in our life. Or maybe we're forgiving people too quickly. We haven't processed hurt. We need to forgive, but we need to process that hurt too. We're told we have to forgive, and we haven't really done the work to make that actually beneficial in our life. And sometimes we take perfectionism, we call that growth. That's not growth. That's perfectionism hidden in another way. Sometimes we need to be as best as we can, but other times we need to allow ourselves to be good enough. We can get tired also. We can get tired and go through the motions of life or our recovery or our healing. And it's not real genuine transformation. Sometimes things plateau in life. We need a rest period and then engage in some new relationships and connections or start doing some work in some area. People come back to me and says, I'm dealing with this problem again. I guess I didn't really work the first time. It didn't stick. Not necessarily. It might be true, but maybe you're just going to a deeper level. Maybe your life is different now, and because it's different, you're dealing with different aspects of that same grief, trauma, loss, or issue in your life. Again, being compassionate to ourselves as we're going through this healing journey. In summary, we are looking at the GROW method and the four-stage process of grounding, recognition, openness, and walking in wholeness. This is the method that I've used of 30 years of trauma-informed healing, training, and therapy work with individuals to help them heal and to recover, to help professionals overcome compassion fatigue and burnout. And so when we use this grow method, we can grow in every area of our life, body, mind, and spirit. So thanks so much for being a part of this. If you want to become part of the Trauma Champions newsletter, our paid subscribers get access to our Trauma Collective. which has over 100 different trauma-informed tools and resources that you can utilize, including this recording and the handouts that will go along with today's talk. So thanks so much for being a part of this. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.